So today I want to talk about glazes made for decorated wares. And the focus of this video is going to be on the ivory glaze that was developed in the late 1920s. And from here on out, if you hear me use the word ivory, I'm talking about a nice bright white color. I'm not talking about ivory from Fiesta or old ivory from Fiesta. I'm not talking about vellum that was used on Century. So before we get into ivory, I want to talk about what they were doing prior to that. And for the most part, we have clear glazes. This is a Seneca-shaped plate from the early 1900s with an underglaze treatment, and then it was given a clear glaze. And that's how a lot of potteries decorated their wares at the time. But in the late 1920s, a lot of potteries start developing this ivory glaze. And before we really get into that with Homer Laughlin, we're going to look at a couple trade advertisements, copies. This one comes from 1925, and it says 4 big events in Sebring history. And the first one is 1887, when they had their company in East Liverpool. The second one is 1899, founding the town of Sebring. 1911 is the founding of the town of Sebring, Florida. And then finally, in number 4, 1922, development of ivory porcelain by the research department of the Sebring Pottery Company. So Sebring was one of the first to get away from these clear glazes and start this nice bright ivory color. Now, the Edwin M. Knowles China Company might have been the second, and I say that because there's another trade advertisement put out by Sebring, and it says, our hat is off to Edwin M. Knowles. And it's sort of a backhanded congratulatory note. They're saying our hat is off to the Edwin M. Knowles Company for their determination to make high-grade earthenware ivory body. We offer our congratulations and our best wishes. And then it goes on to say, we welcome the competition. Where's that section at? Since the introduction of ivory porcelain in January 1923, we have been going it alone. We welcome the competition. So this was put out roughly about 1925 or so, and this ivory porcelain by Sebring, that's the marking that they would have used on their wares that have this new ivory glaze. Another advertisement, this time from 1927, is actually by Edwin M. Knowles, and they're going 2 new plain shapes in ivory body, Lotus and Santa Barbara. And they're talking about in 1927, the following dinnerware shapes will be in ivory, Maryland, Santa Barbara, and Lotus. And in whiteware, with clear glaze, Mayflower, York, Hampton, and Monterey. So a lot of these potteries, when they started developing their ivory glazes, they started putting it in their back stamps. So you'll see here, this says the Edwin M. Knowles ivory. This is the Lotus shape, not to be confused with Lotus ware by KT&K. But you will see ivory in their back stamp. Now this piece is KT&K, and they have KT&K ivory, Knowles, Taylor, Knowles. So what you can see here is a lot of grandstanding going on by these potteries to promote their ivory glazes. Crooksville went a step further. They actually made a shape with their ivory glaze and called it Ivora. There's actually a tie-in with Ivora and Homer Laughlin, which we'll get to when we start looking at Rose and Poppy. I didn't have any examples of these other companies, so I printed out some back stamps. This is a Steubenville pottery with their ivory and their marking, with their little Fort Steuben logo. The Durwood shape by W.S. George, they've got ivory in their back stamp. Taylor, Smith & Taylor with the Paramount shape, Paramount ivory from 1929. You'll also see a capital ivory marking by TS&T. So you have all this promotion going on of the ivory glaze in the late 1920s and early 1930s. But Homer Laughlin really didn't do that. Not to the same degree, at least. This is an advertisement for Yellowstone from 1926. And they say, the soft ivory shade reproducing the exquisite color tone of Bleininger. That's pretty much all they say in this advertisement with respect to their ivory glaze. So we come back over here and we look at our ivory color, and you can see between the Seneca piece and the ivory piece The Seneca piece sort of has a bluish green tint to it as opposed to this nice clean ivory ware. Now ivory for Homer Laughlin was developed by Albert Victor Bleininger. I hope I'm saying that name right because I've never heard it pronounced before. It's spelled Bleininger. I have a picture of him, or a copy of a picture, of Dr. Bleininger. This was taken in 1925, I believe. He was born in Bavaria in 1873. He came to the United States and got his degree in chemistry at Ohio State in 1901, eventually got his PhD. He worked at Homer Laughlin for a number of years, and then in 1946 he suffered a heart attack and died, and he's buried at Riverview Cemetery in East Liverpool. So all the glazes we're going to look at by Homer Laughlin today were the result of his work. I mean, he played a major role in it. Sometimes we like to say, oh, well, Frederick Reed's responsible for the vellum glaze. Well, actually, Bleininger would have had more of a hand in it because he was the chemist working in the department for development for these glazes. So let's look at some of the glazes as they develop over time. We've looked at the clear glaze, which is an early one, used on fancy embossed shapes. It would have been used on Empress and Quaker and such. Then when ivory comes out, again, this nice bright white color, it's used on Yellowstone, and then it's used on Wells next. It's also used on Knoll. I should point that out, Knoll and Trellis. Although Knoll, Trellis, and Old Roman, they do use the yellow glaze and the green glaze from the Depression era that we've already gone over before. Vellum is another decorated ware glaze that was developed in 1931 for the century shape. After it became a success, then they started using it on Wells and Yellowstone, and then Jade that followed. It is a nice, soft, off-white texture. Again, I'm not going to be calling vellum ivory. If I want to talk about vellum, I will be calling it vellum from here on out. I know this can be confusing for some of you who collect Fiesta, and you're so used to hearing ivory with respect to Fiesta. But when we talk about Fiesta, we're going to call it old ivory. And that's the reason why old ivory is called old ivory, to differentiate it from the regular ivory glaze that was originally developed for Yellowstone. So after vellum comes light yellow. I don't know if it's going to show up in this video or not, but this is a darker shade. Let me move it over with the ivory, and you might be able to see the difference. But light yellow was used on Virginia rose. That's what I have in my hand, the Virginia rose shape. It was used on marigold, coronet, Orleans, Ravenna, shapes of the mid-1930s. You're going to see a lot of variation of the light yellow glaze. If you have large sets of Virginia rose spanning several decades, you're going to notice that the ones from the 30s are slightly darker than the ones made, let's say, in the 50s. So that's the light yellow glaze. Oven serve is somewhat similar to the light yellow glaze. It has a yellow cast to it, but it's different in that it had to be formulated properly to go from the refrigerator to the oven to the table. The oven serve glaze is only used on a couple of lines, oven serve and kitchen craft. And we've already looked at old ivory, which is from Fiesta. Fiesta is the only line that used old ivory. And then finally there's eggshell ivory, which is formulated a little different from the regular ivory in that it had to go on this talc body that was used for the eggshell lines, like theme eggshell, Georgian eggshell, Nautilus eggshell, swing, Andover, and so forth. So those are your decorated ware glazes. Most of these were developed in the 30s. In fact, I'll go through these again. This would be 1925. This would be 1927, 28, 1931, probably 32 for that one, 33 for oven serve, 35, 36 for old ivory, and then of course the eggshell lines would have been about 1936, 1937. Again, all these were developed by Dr. Albert Victor Bleininger. Again, I hope I'm saying that right. So let's look, before we wrap this up, let's look at a couple catalogs here. And this one, some pound sterling catalogs, is from 1932, white body, yellow glaze specials. And we open it up and it starts right off with white body. So these are Empress and Quaker treatments with pricing scales. And the reason why I'm showing you, I just want to show you how these glaze names were used. All of these are going to be whiteware with clear glazes. And then we get to, let's see, decorations on yellow glaze, Knoll, trellis, and Old Roman. And we see all the different decorations on here. I was actually surprised when I got this out today how many are in Old Roman. There's quite a few. I wish we could find more Old Roman out there. But it's just a tough shape to find. And then we've got some special patterns on here, and you'll see it says, like it'll say Yellowstone and ivory clock face, vellum, ivory clock face. So we've got some different glazes in here. It says YEL, VEL, that's Yellowstone vellum. So that's being differentiated from just plain Yellowstone, which is Yellowstone ivory. And then we have some more. We've got some trellis and Yellowstone vellum and so forth. So let's look at a 1937 one real quick. We'll wrap this up. If I can open the page. And it starts off with nautilus shape. And nautilus has ivory, the regular nautilus shape. And you may have seen that in books before where it talks about Georgian ivory and nautilus ivory. That ivory is not just made up, it's referring to the glaze, the ivory glaze. Again, not Fiesta. Some more nautilus. And again, here's Georgian shape ivory. So this is not Georgian eggshell. In fact, when this book was printed, Georgian eggshell didn't exist yet. So it's Georgian ivory. Dinnerware. Virginia rose shape light yellow glaze. That's what we just saw over here with this off white color, somewhat darker. Marigold shape light yellow glaze. Century shape vellum glaze. Of course, we saw the vellum glaze. A nice soft, it's one of the nicest glazes Homer Laughlin ever did, the vellum. Yellowstone shape ivory and vellum glazes. And the initial Yellowstone shape treatments are all going to be ivory. And the later ones, then they start with VEL, start noting which ones are vellum and which ones are not. And here we have Empress, Republic, Quaker, and Wells, decorations in the ivory body, clear, and vellum glazes. So here now they're going to specify in the descriptions which one are ivory body with clear glazes and which one are vellum glazes and so forth. If there's nothing specified, then it's going to be a clear glaze. But as we, in fact, these are all clear glazes. These are white bodies. And I was going to see if there might be one with a vellum in here. Not that it's that important. What was that? And vellum glazes. None of these are listed with a vellum. Here we go. Actually, this is kind of interesting. This one's got W1153 Fiesta IV, which that's Fiesta Old Ivory, and it's got Tom and Jerry with gold bands. There's actually a treatment number for your Fiesta Tom and Jerry sets, W1153. There's also the child set, which is in a vellum glaze, which is W1353. What else do we have here? Here we go, it's specifying Wells vellum, and here it just says Wells. So this is Wells ivory and this is Wells vellum. So there's always a distinction with these decorated wares. More white body with clear glaze. And here's Orleans shape, light yellow glaze. Same glaze that's used on Virginia rose. Brittany shape, silk screen treatments ivory. I don't want to get into that right now. Wait till we get to Brittany and then we'll talk about silk screen. Oven serve over glaze treatment special glaze. This is what I was talking about. It has oven serve has a special glaze because it had to withstand the temperature variations. And that's about it. So yeah, decorated ware glazes. There's all sorts of them from the 1930s. Sebring was the first. We need to be aware of that because the trade journals say so. And yeah, that's going to be it for today. So as I move forward with these videos, again, we have the clear glaze, which is the earlier Homer Laughlin shapes, the ivory glaze, which is a nice pure white glaze, yellow, which was used mainly on Knoll, trellis, and Old Roman, vellum, this nice off-white glaze, which was used on Century, Jade, Wells, and Yellowstone, Light yellow that was used on shapes like Virginia rose, marigold, coronet, Orleans Ravenna. Oven serve, which was used only on oven serve and kitchen craft. Old ivory, which was used on Fiesta, of course. And of course the eggshell ivory glazes, which are all on the eggshell lines, mainly from the late 1930s and early 1940s. So that's going to be it for today.